like to go back in time and talk about, when did you decide that acting was your thing? When did you want to become an actor?
When did I want to become an actor? I got the first pangs of wanting to be an actor when I was probably about 5 years old at a family wedding, and it was really boring and people were falling asleep at the best man's speech. And I surreptitiously climbed on the table and shouted out, "You're only here for the beer." And it brought the house down in the middle of a speech. And I thought, oh, this is quite fun, actually getting on a stage, even if it's at a table at a wedding. And then I joined a drama group when I was younger and performed in musical theatre shows and plays. And for the want of being good at anything else, that's really what I decided to follow and do.
Yeah. Was there anything else that you wanted to do and prior to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was actually quite small as a boy, and I for a while I thought about being a jockey because I used to love riding horses and I love horses. And then the other thing that I thought about doing was being a barrister or an attorney, a trial attorney, because I like the idea of making arguments on behalf of people. No, I fell into acting. I think, there's a great philosopher called Alan Watts, English philosopher. He said, find a job in which you can get paid to play, and then you've cracked it. And if acting and being an artist, if you can get paid to play, or a sports person, whatever it is that you're playing at, or you feel like there's a sense of curiosity and wonder and you're motivated and you're enlightened to kind of learn more and do more in that sphere or space, then you're living a good life.
Yeah. Hey, I come from sports. So for me, it was always about, you put the uniform on or you put on your training gear and you say, wow, this is what I get to do every day.
Yeah, that was probably that was my passion as a kid. I was the captain of all the sports teams, and sports and being on the sports pitch or the field or the court. That was really my salvation in terms of what saved me from my upbringing, my family environment at home, and leading a life of being on the streets and just being a naughty lad. And I loved sports. My favorite teacher, no one's ever asked me my favorite teacher, and I usually don't answer who my favorite quote unquote anything is because there's so many favorites. But my PE teachers, my physical education teachers, were so inspirational. They were the right balance of discipline, risk reward, tough love, inspiration and enthusiasm and motivation. I remember my first day at PE class, like it was yesterday. It was a school on stilts, we called it. So it was kind of set up high and at a good gym, and we're all just waiting and walking to go up to the gym class, and there was Mr. Williams and Mr. Christian. Mr. Christian was kind of this thin, cerebral kind of guy. Mr. Williams was this kind of rotund Welsh rugby player, scruffy looking guy. And he was the really loud belching guy. And he was like, "What do you think you're doing?" And we all just stopped. He's like, "Get back in line." And it was like, whoa. And we were just taught right from the off. You listen, and then you learn. And my journey through sports, still to this day, it set me up in so many ways for success. And I was pretty successful at sports. I mean, I nearly became a professional soccer player and nearly became a professional rugby player. And so sports is still, I don't have the time to watch as much as I'd like, but I still love, for me, football or soccer is still where it's at. And I have friends who play, professionally in the NFL, and that's an amazing sport, American football. And just some of the American sports are amazing. Baseball, I'm not as like, I think you have to have a Bible of stats with baseball, and it's really about being at the game and getting the hot dogs and the 7th inning stretch and singing the anthem and all of that. It's like the American sport, isn't it?
Totally. Much like, football and your homeland is so big. We love watching, on Amazon, you can watch a bunch of, documentaries on, soccer, football, and it's pretty cool. We watched one on Rooney a couple of weeks ago, and that was, it's just nice to capture those stories. But again, there's so many lessons to be learned from sports. You said, hey, when I was growing up, I learned some lessons in sports that I still apply towards my success today. What are those lessons for you? Like,
Gosh, I mean, there's loads of them. Practicing putting in the reps. I mean, even later on, in late life, I've done about 12, 15 triathlons to raise funds for Children's Hospital LA. And I remember doing my first one and how, because I used to swim as a kid and I love swimming, but open water swimming, competitive swimming in a triathlon, when people are grabbing at your ankles and your goggles are coming off and getting fogged up, I never enjoyed that part of it. And then I was fortunate enough to work with the USA Olympic triathlon coach. And I learned from him about technique, particularly with swimming. I was doing 26 strokes per lap in the pool, and he got me down to 12 or 13. And technique just made it so, but also putting in the hours and the grind before the race. I think my fourth or fifth race, I got a bit arrogant and thought, you know what, I'm Mr. Superfit at 46 years old, and I can just do it without any practice and training. I suffered I still remember the suffering that I went through in that race. And then the following year with this trainer, I literally halved the time in the triathlon, and that was all because of the practice that I put in. And I think as well, I think back to a rugby game when I was 12 years old, and a high tackle that I put in because I got so invested in being a monster and going after it. And it was this kid who was twice the size of me. I used to play scrum half, and it was me against him. I was the last remaining back to save the try. And I remember my Mr. Christian, the PE teacher, taking me aside after the game. He actually substituted me right after that tackle and didn't say anything. It was just like, you're done. It's over. You're off. You're not playing anymore. And how devastated I was in that moment. And I think that what that moment taught me was controlled discipline and controlled anger and rage in the moment, and not to go above the line, as I call it. There's so many lessons. How to be a team player, how to inspire. I was a bit mouthy when I played I was the captain of most of the teams. So I was a bit mouthy, and particularly on the footy or the soccer pitch. And I would get on people, and it was known where,
Is that bad or is that good?
I think, well, you know what? It can be good and it can be bad. I think, part of it's like the evolution of sports psychology in professional sports, understanding, some of the great managers, I don't think are necessarily the best tacticians. They are great tacticians as well as being sports psychologists and understanding the individual personality of a player and how to get the best out of a player. Some players are gregarious and arrogant and strut around and so self-confident. Some players, that's a facade for deeper insecurities. Some are quite shy and don't respond. Like, I didn't respond well to yelling and berating and screaming and kind of dragging me down, and because I had a self-belief and self-confidence that to me was just unshakable. I was a winner. I was gonna win every time I stepped on the field. It was pity you because you've already lost. That was the belief, that was the mindset I had when I approached sports and many things in my life.
Where did that originate? Where does that come from? That's, for me, like in my work, I'm always fascinated with where that comes from.
Well, I think, some people might say it comes from inspiration and mentors and, maybe there's part of it was being surrounded by, in the neighborhood I lived quite close by was the Liverpool Football Club, which is the team that I support, and I kind of went to see and played a little bit for when I was a kid. They were brilliant and dominating in the late 70s and early 80s, and seeing some of that success. But I think, some people will say that it was a particular coach or it was a particular mentor. For me, it was from inside, and I had a burning desire to get out of my hometown. I had a burning desire to be noticed and be a winner and a champion. And I had a burning desire that was driven by, the Japanese have a word called koyashi. Okay, so it's when someone inspires you through negative reinforcement. So anytime someone said to me, you can't do that, or you're not going to win, internally I would say to myself, oh yeah, just and watch me. And I still have that today when people say, that's crazy. What a crazy idea. You can't do that. No, that's nonsense. You're never going to win. That's never going to happen. And I talk with people about the I cans rather than the I can'ts, because there's so many times I hear people say, oh, I can't do that. And it could be something quite trivial. Like you could be at a dinner party and there could be a piano and someone sings a song. You go, oh, come on, Jane sings a song. Oh, I can't sing. Well, you know what? You can sing. You don't have to sing right now, but don't tell yourself that you can't. So I think the inner monologue, the inner dialogue, and the inner critic is really important to kind of get in touch with and get in that conversation with if it rears its ugly head.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you say that. You know, Derek Jeter, they just did a big documentary on him on ESPN. And one of the things he said is, I remember every person that told me that I couldn't do it. I know when it was said, I know what they were wearing, and I never forgot it. So it was very similar, and it inspired him to prove all of them wrong.
Yeah, I could tell you the same. I mean,
you know, color of the dissect that a little bit and say, well, you know, that's not good. That's, you know, you may have some deep issues there. But at the same time, you know, I feel that, like, you know, competition is an important part of the spirit.
Oh, I think we're all, I mean, look, maybe part of my competitive spirit came through having an older brother. You know?
Yeah, I would think so, right?
Huh?
I would think that could be part of it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we all like to play. I mean, look, gaming, playing games, whether it's video game or a board game or you know, healthy, good, positive competition is really good, especially for younger men, our younger generation of boys who I think have been massively let down recently over the last few years by the educational system and by all of the ideology that's out there about safe spaces. And, you know, young boys and young men have to take risks. That's what, you know, it's the hunter-gatherer, it's those rites of passage that need to be encouraged. I think there's a difference between the matriarch and the patriarch, mom and dad, and mothering and fathering. I think mom's natural instinct is to pull child in close, if it's boy or girl, but particularly, you know, a younger child, and nurture. And are you okay? Is everything okay? Whereas the male, there's a male propensity to actually risk and reward. Get out there, son. You're gonna take risks. Life is about risk and reward. You can be responsible with those risks. There's going to be danger. I'm going to learn along with you, and I think that's true of a good coach as well, and a good manager of a sports team. Is you really get the sense through adversity that your coach or your manager is the leader and will have your back.
How do we get back to that? You know, where you can actually push kids and champion kids. You know, let's lead. You know, say young boys. How do we get them to be more, you know, like young men, as opposed to, you know, sometimes you see 25-year-olds that are still living at home, being coddled by their parents and not being pushed to go out and hunt.
Well, you know, there's a great book by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff called The Coddling of the American Mind. And I think there has been a lot of coddling and helicopter parenting, and we live in different times now. And, you know, some of, you know, the evolution of the last couple of decades has been great. But in terms of your question, how do we do that? Well, I think it starts, you know, locally at school. I think you have to push back if, you know, there's safe spaces and feelings are being protected and words are offensive. No, they're not. I mean, look, nobody likes being bullied. I was attacked 3 times my first day of school. I didn't want to fight. I had to fight to defend myself, but I learned pretty quick that I couldn't get, you know, in the gladiatorial arena that was at the end of the street, down the end of the school, in the cul-de-sac where all the kids would sit around, that I had to defend myself, and I had to be physical. And roughhousing, I think, for boys is a particularly important part of adolescence, and learning boundaries through roughhousing as well. So I think, you know, we have to look, our policies, our institutions, our educational systems, they've become so interwoven with I guess an intersectional mindset that's about being politically correct, that we have to get away from that. We have to get more towards the individual rather than the group, and really focus on on what was good about our, the days gone by. History teaches us a lot bad, but also a lot of good. And unless we're competitive and we learn the value of losing, I mean, look, I talk about failing. I like to fail often because fail, F-A-I-L, is the first attempt in learning, and thought is born of failure. It's quintessential essence when cognition sparks. So we need to keep failing in order to learn,
How do you move yourself towards failure today? What are some of the things that you do to keep yourself failing in order to succeed?
Well, curiosity. I mean, I try as much as I can new experiences, and challenge myself. And I think rituals are a big part of my life. Practices and ceremonies, whether it be Eastern rituals, Western rituals, spiritual rituals, how I move through the day, and getting that patterned, habitualized routinization of a ritual and how I move through the world is important, and further extending my presence in the world. But at the same time, I think it's important to mix it up occasionally, because we get stagnant, we get stale. I mean, we talk about left and right brain hemisphere, and the left brain hemisphere wants to close down to certainties and probabilities, and wants consistency and answers and routinization. And the right brain hemisphere wants to open up to possibilities, is analogous, that needs adventure and needs that sense of newness. So how do we find that balance? And I think it's continual yin and yang and rupture and repair and to and fro, and taking some of the lessons from the great lessons from history, and then kind of turning them on their head and questioning the commonly held beliefs, challenging those preconceptions, to phenomenologically experience the world a little more in terms of the experiential. I mean, I often say to people, who knows more about basketball? Maybe it's a question for you. Who knows more about basketball? Phil Jackson or Michael Jordan? So Phil Jackson, philosophically, technically brilliant master of the game. Michael Jordan, brilliant player of the game. I'm going to go with Michael Jordan every time because he's got the experience. So someone can teach all they want, but unless you've actually been on the playing field and taken part in the game at a high level, you're never really going to know what it feels like.
So these rituals that you just mentioned, what's an example of a ritual that you participate in?
Well, if I wake up, when I wake or not, if I wake up.
I was going to say, we're happy to have you.
Is that right? If I wake up at a certain time. No, one might be, going to the beach in the morning and finding my little slice of beach very early, walking out on the jetty, the rock jetty, and practicing Qigong or moving meditation at the end of that, and going through my brocades and stretching exercises and breathing exercises that are part of Qigong. And then I might enter the ocean, and what I call the welcoming the waves ritual. So I'll walk into the ocean, and if the waves are crashing, I'll face the waves head on, arms out, and I'll take the knocks and the licks that nature, which is so indifferent, has to offer me. Because if I can deal with that, I can deal with anything on land when I get back in from there. And that's invigorating. It's cold water. It's like a kind of steady plunge, if you will, to kind of test my resolve and my nerve. And there's a little bit of danger there because there's no one else around, and the current's strong, and who knows what creatures are in the ocean.
Yeah, I think it's cool too that, when you talk about rituals, I talk a lot about activating your physical in order to activate your psychological. Doing that, I mean, put you right in it.
Yeah. Well, I think, how do you activate? I mean, active play, I think, for me, when I tried to break down one time my approach to acting and performance art, if you will, and I broke it down what I call the ABCs of what I call alive coaching. So A is the art, And that's practicing activating creative flow states. And by flow states, I mean how to let go so the imagination can effortlessly take over during performance. And then the B is the business. So in my instance is the business of show, how to innovate a personalized roadmap that empowers the artist to perpetually exceed limitations, to break through limits, innovate through those limits that we meet, and elevate career trajectory exponentially. And the C is craft, the craft in process, practicing techniques that motivate the artist toward more confident mastery of their creative process. I don't think we can ever become a master. Anyone who says they are a master, like someone who says they're a genius, they're not a genius and they're not a master. Because the more I learn and the more I get to know, the more I realize I don't know, and I don't know what I don't know. So I'm going to keep moving into failing and learning through my first attempts.
I like that. That's right. That's very cool. Yeah. I haven't heard it broke down like that. Very nice. So for you, what is your main thing? Would you say is acting your main thing? I know you wrote the book, The Respondent. What is filmmaking? What is your main thing? Or do you feel it's important not to look at anything as a main thing? It's just what I'm doing right now.
The latter would be the answer. Yeah. I don't have a main, whatever. Like right now, my main thing is doing a podcast with you. So that's my focus, and that's where it lies. But yeah, I think it's important to keep innovating newness and curiosity, and keeping that interest in whatever, wherever you're led. Yeah. I love that.
Innovating newness. I take a lot of notes as people speak because it helps me to absorb the content. I'm a lot like you. I like to always be learning and then take the lessons that others share and then apply them into life and say, yeah, that's cool. I remember the ABCs. How can I apply that to life? And that's, for me, doing this podcast and doing the show is really to give people tactical tools that they could use and apply to enhancing their own performance in life and enhancing their own life experience. So this is great. This is great stuff. What was it like for you writing your book? Did you find that to be, what was the experience like?
Very painful and extremely rewarding. I mean, it's not a book where people read and they go, oh, I really enjoyed your book. Yeah. It was, I mean, I didn't want to write the book. I had to write the book. I didn't really have a choice. And by that, I mean, it was a sense-making exercise, sense-making therapy, recovery. It was, I wrote it for many reasons, really. Yeah.
So for Greg, for people that don't know your story, somebody may say, well, what was he recovering from? So in a quick snapshot, and again, they'll read the book to get more information, but what was what were you recovering from?
Well, I was living I'd lived a great life and was, I was living in a great neighborhood in LA, and my two young sons were in a great private school. I was in a country club, and my career was going great. And then suddenly out of the blue, after 20 years of marriage and never an issue, never a problem, one day, March 5th, 2015, in the span of 8 hours, I was ushered from my home in handcuffs, incarcerated, first of 5 incarcerations, subject to a temporary restraining order in divorce court on the basis of a false allegation, became homeless and almost destitute overnight. And my sons lost their father for half their childhoods, and they were the meaning of my life. Like, I lived and breathed for my boys, and they spent all their time with me. I was that connected, involved dad who, I cut their umbilical cords. I changed their diapers. I took them to the pediatrician. I was the volunteer at school. I was their first coaches and all of their volunteer extracurricular activities. So that happened to me, and I called it, the book is called The Respondent, Exposing the Cartel of Family Law, the cartel of family law basically showed up on my doorstep and stole my freedom and kidnapped my children and in effect destroyed my family. And what I found out through my odyssey through the system, kind of Kafkaesque odyssey, which it really was, is that hundreds of thousands of people have been suffering through the system and are still, stuck in it. And I discovered that the judges and attorneys and state bar associations, the mediators, psychologists, none of them want their dirty little secret to get out, which is that this is nearly a $100 billion a year. I call it the American divorce machine. And it's the only branch of our legal system where there's no presumption of innocence. And that means that murderers, rapists, terrorists, pedophiles all get more legal rights than law-abiding parents and spouses. So I started writing the book and starting a movement. And that's really was the genesis for why I got involved in this particular area.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that's a big part of where your energy goes now.
Yeah, on a daily basis, I'm working towards furthering the movement and speaking with people who, are suffering through the system and can't get relief, and doing my best to kind of spread the word and, creating media projects for that. We're about to go into production on a doc series for it, and really just exposing these people who've had it way too easy for way too long. It's really abhorrent when you think about it, that people are just putting profits over parents and cash over kids. And, when you look at the fact that 4,000 children lose a parent every day in family law courts across America, that's 4,000 children. And the states get reimbursed $6,000 for every child that's placed into foster care. And there's more stats and details as well. I mean, we basically have a system of legalized child trafficking in America. And it stuns me that it's not spoken about. But at the same time, it doesn't surprise me, because there's people in very high places who are making a ton of money from child trafficking legally.
Yeah, that's amazing. No, I've been following some of your work. And for me, I always wanted to talk to you about what's driving it and what keeps you going every day. What's the motivation? And I'm guessing, it's that one person that you can help deal with their situation and inspire others along the way as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I get so many messages a day, and occasionally I get to speak to people one-on-one. I mean, like, for example, I got an email through from a father who hadn't seen his son in 14 years. He'd been alienated and lost him through the court system through no fault of his own. And the email said, "I'll never be able to thank you enough." And below it said, I hadn't heard from my son in 14 years. He just sent me this email below. "Thank you. I'll never be able to thank you enough." And the email from his son was from his son, who said, "I just, read and heard about Greg Ellis' story. This is your story. I got it. I was so wrong. Will you be my father again? Your son." And he now has a connection with his son that, and his son has reunited with his father, because they're the true innocence. The children are the true innocence of the family law system. And, all statistics show that it's the safest place for a child and the best place for a child is with their biological parents. And when we have a system that's breaking them up, then, so yeah, it's extremely rewarding, but in a very different way. I used to walk down red carpets, and now I want to walk up the steps of legislature, and state, buildings to give testimony.
When we first started talking, I believe you said that one of the paths that you potentially were going to take was a legal path. Did you say that you wanted like law? That was something that I had thought about doing when I was young. But
that takes, the legal system is so, you have to go to law school for many years for a reason. That's a lot of work. And I wasn't afforded the opportunity to go to law school. And frankly, my talents aren't sitting down and writing legal arguments. And, I'm much more comfortable as an orator than I am as writing papers and motions and declarations.
Yeah. But you know what? I think all of your life experiences probably make you the man for the job to do what you're doing now.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why there hasn't been much movement in this area is because there's been a lot of smaller siloed movements and organizations and people, and it's very difficult, so difficult to get on mainstream media discussing the subject. I mean, look, I'm a heterosexual Caucasian middle-aged actor from Hollywood. Yeah, who cares? They could be like, oh, who cares? Who cares? You know, if I were a kind of, you know, a different sex, and maybe I would be invited on. And, you know, I speak on behalf of families and, you know, and parents and mothers and fathers and children. And, you know, there's so many men who are stuck in this system that I predominantly speak about the issues of fatherhood, and dead broke dads, not just deadbeat dads, and black child support, not just back child support, and the way the system is set up to basically bankrupt minority men. But that, you know, isn't good enough for some, because I'm not drinking enough Coca-Cola, and I'm not diverse enough.
Yeah.
But I don't particularly care. When I get attacked, it just means that I'm doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, everybody wants to attack people that are standing for something today, right?
Oh yeah.
You know,
The offense Olympics.
yeah, you put yourself out there and this is what you believe. And you know what? It's that one father that you help and that one family that you help put back together that keeps you going. So, but this is great. You know, what's interesting, and I'm sure you know this, but there's this like thread that goes through the middle of your story, and you know, that competitor that always trying to do your best. It shows even with what you're doing now. You know, I mean, you could easily take the road where it's like, hey, I'm just going to go do my Hollywood thing, and I'm going to turn a blind eye to all this, and you know, I'll make my money, I'll live my life, and bop, bop, bop. But you've actually said, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to focus. I'm passionate about this. This affected me, and I'm going to build awareness around this. And that takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of guts. And that for me, that's the champion in you.
Wow, thank you. You know what? I think about the people. I think about the fathers who are no longer with us, who wrote suicide notes because they can't contend with I call it suicide by living grief. You know, we talk about rituals. You know, if someone dies, we get to say goodbye. We get to sign a book. We get to go and give a eulogy. We ritualize and have a ceremony for them. But so many parents have been removed from their children and children from their parents that it can be unbearable. It can be an inescapable, unrelenting trauma, complex big T, not just little t trauma. So, and many people don't have support. Financial support, or you know, therapy, or friends. You know, people feel so alone. I think everyone's struggling with something, and many people are living lives of quiet desperation. So, the amount of times that I've seen messages with people just saying, "Thank you." I've had some that I was going to end my life because I thought I was living, you know, in this authoritarian maze that I was trapped in. I could never escape. But there's someone else. And your story let me know that I wasn't alone. And I think that alone, I think we have to score some victories for you. I mean, who was it who said, be afraid to die until you've scored some victories for humanity? And I think many times we can go through life, kind of unconscious to a degree, thinking about me, what can I get? What can I get? What awards can I get? What trophies can I win? What accolades can I receive? What recognition can I get in the newspaper? How will people perceive me? Am I a quote unquote seen as a champion? Well, there are so many local heroes. And I think when we can at least start to shift around to what can I give rather than what can I get? And maybe that comes later in life. I don't know. I got to that point, and that's kind of where I'm trying to live right now. And I think the survivor instinct in me, which may have come from never quitting when I was a kid. I mean, some of my greatest sporting triumphs were not when I won 5-0 or not when we won at basketball 72-36. It was It was when we were up against the team we were told we had no chance against, or when we were 3-0 down with 10 minutes to play. And that deep belief and making others around you believe that you can not only survive, we can come back and we can be victorious. And even if you come back to 3-2 and you still lose, or you get to 3-3 and it's a draw, like that is real triumph. And I think that instills that self-confidence where you through experience, you realize, you know what? I'm not a quitter. Never say. And also staying in the moment, staying in the now moment. I have a friend who used to play tennis professionally, and I was doing a show in London, and he's won 17 Grand Slams. His first was a doubles title with John McEnroe back in the day. And I remember the first time I watched him play, and he was playing the great Ivan Lendl, or Ivan Lendl, in the quarterfinals at Wimbledon. And he had 3 match points and he lost them all. Now, I didn't ask him straight away after the match because I go to Wimbledon with him every year and watch him. But down the line, a couple of years later, I asked him about that match. I said, what happened? And he said, I'd already won the game in my mind. I said, what do you mean? He said, when we changed around and I was serving for the match and I had match point, I was already in the press conference. I was already thinking about who I was going to play in the next round. I was already projecting into the, and then before I knew it, I'd lost 1 match point. And then I was still thinking, well, I've got 2 more. And I was comfortable rather than thinking like a great golfer does, stroke by stroke, like a great baseball player, I would imagine, even though I'm not a baseball player, on the mound. Each pitch is its own pitch. Yes, you're aware, I think, to some degree. You have to be aware of the pitch count. But really, at the end of the day, that pitch comes in and you are treating it like you're not thinking, I guess, if the bases are loaded and you hit a home run and it's the bottom of the 9th, I think is what you call it, and you're going to win the World Series. You're not thinking, oh my God, we're going to win the World Series and the team's going to love me and I'm going to be, you're just in that zone thinking about that. And that's training and experience, I think. Yeah. And belief.
And that's where it all shows up. Right. If you trained properly and you have the experience and you've prepared, in those moments, you'll be ready. But, even then, there's always that something that could shoot in and take your distract you. We've seen it happen to the greats in many different sports. But I have one question I always end the show with, and I ask this. I call it the Becoming a Champion show. We're all on a journey to become a champion, become our champion self. What does the word champion mean to you?
Well, there's many things I could say. You mentioned becoming a champion. I think becoming is a very interesting word. I think we are all always becoming. I once asked people what singular word they would use to describe God. And in that moment, I said becoming. I think about my charity, CPU, Children and Parents United. And I talk about the A team of family champions. I think a champion can be, a pinnacle that's striven for and attained. And it can also be about belief and who believes in you. Whether you believe in yourself, whether you're your own champion, what's your own inner dialogue and inner monologue, success.
I like actually what you said right there about the inner dialogue and monologue, because that I find is what will make you or break you in many ways.
Yeah, and I think when you talk of champions, I have a feeling that the greatest champions, the greatest sports, let's say sports champions, don't believe that they're champions once they win a championship. That I think there's probably a sense of relief that they have finally got that what they strove for all those years. But I think when we talk about a true champion, does that indicate there's a false champion? But a multi-championship winning athlete will not rest on their laurels, will not become arrogant, will not become, will lead by example. Like I would imagine that Tom Brady isn't the last person into training every day. I would imagine that each year comes around, he doesn't think, well, I've won 4 rings now, so I don't have to work as hard. I would imagine that that level of pushing oneself in the capital S, in the inner monologue, is about being number one, like in my business, number one on the call sheet. Whoever is the star of a TV show, they need to lead by example. And sometimes they need to motivate, and sometimes there needs to be tough love, and sometimes they need to turn it on themselves and be publicly apologetic to the crew within the privacy of the environment. And sometimes they just need to motivate. But most of the time, it's through their actions and behavior, not through their words, that the example is set.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's well said. Very cool. As you talk about that the champion, that it's not the moment in which they're crowned. I look at it, and from talking to many of them, they see themselves as champions right from the start. That moment is just a moment that reinforces what they believed all along.
That's right.
So
that's exactly right.
Yeah, this was very cool. Well, I'm excited we got a chance to connect and talk about many different things, from how you grew up to your career to what you're doing now, and how to apply passion and belief into everything that you do. So this was super cool. I'm thrilled we had a chance to spend some
Me
time.
too, Dana. Me too.